And we're streaming. And we're recording. So let's do the intro.
All right. Just remember what I've taught you.
What the fuck is that?
Hey, yo.
Oh, it's that time again, isn't it? Oh, wow. So it is a dark and dreary Wednesday, and yet no birds are summoning Lenore to us. Isn't that, wow, isn't that nice? But here we are. It's good to see you. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're enjoying yourselves. I hope you've been writing. I hope you've been creating. I hope you have managed to stay afloat in these ever chaotic waters. Because I've missed you. It's nice to be here. Let's go. Ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, non-binary pals, friends, writers, makers, doers, dreamers, hopers, puppeteers, sex workers, dancers, people who don't like pants, people who have trouble making decisions, anybody who's ever eaten pretzels, anybody who's ever tried to laminate dough, anyone who's ever tried to clean out a garage, screenwriters, cinematographers, pole dancers, pole dancing installers, anybody who's ever decided to get into a fight on Twitter with a company with unfair business practices, anybody who's ever thrown eggs at a politician, because honestly, that's the easiest thing you should throw at them. And most importantly, the comrades. How you guys doing? You good? You ready for this? You ready to rock and roll here? I'm pretty pleased with this. Let's go. So if this is the first time you are hearing this, if this is the first time that I am fortunate enough to be in your ears, thank you. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. My hope is that over the next 2 hours, I can inform and challenge and provoke and encourage you so that you can go be more successful in whatever creative endeavor you are endeavoring to create. My name is John Adamus. I am the writer next door. Somehow, through no fault of my own, I end up being him, so I guess I got to keep doing this. Isn't that fun for everybody? Really what this is, it's about 2 hours of answering questions submitted from all corners of social media, emails, DMs, tweets, etc., as well as the questions asked by those people in chat. Twitch, say hi to Zoom. Zoom, say hi to Twitch. YouTube, say hi to Zoom and Twitch. It's good to see you. How you been? I want to take a note real quick and thank everybody for their very nice comments on Monday night's stream on creativity and mental health. 99.9% of everybody had just wonderful, heartwarming things to say, and it really, I needed it. You guys don't understand. I really needed it. So I was really very, very pleased to see the nice people say nice things. And yeah, for that 0.01% who, I don't know why you're choosing to be negative to a guy who tries to teach people how to write books, but I hope somewhere in the world there's someone nice to you, because it sure as fuck isn't going to be me, you know what I'm saying? So, with that said, I think we should get started, shall we? Oh, one quick note. I'm aware that there is an American holiday coming soon. I haven't quite decided what we're going to do to compensate for that. I don't normally stream on Thursdays anyway, but I will probably still stream that Wednesday evening before. Stay tuned for more decisions as they happen. Other small note, I will be transitioning into different streaming software. So if you're watching this on YouTube, be prepared that things might visually look different in the very near future, because it's time to ditch Streamlabs and go use other stuff. And I'm pretty excited about it, but if you want all the details on that, go jump on the Discord, where I'm sure you can listen to me mutter, curse, and sputter trying to get everything all hooked up and set up the way I want. But that's John's issue for another day. For now, we have some questions that need answering. So let's go. Question number 1. John, what are 3 resources to help me get better at pitching? I feel like this question comes up a lot, and that's good because I keep coming up with different tools to help you pitch. But here are 3 more things that you can engage with, read, view, etc., so that you can get better at pitching. I would like for you to watch TV, particularly terrestrial TV with commercials, and understand that any commercial for whatever the hell the product is, where you feel clearly one specific emotion upon viewing it, counts. Because ideally, when we're pitching a book, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about mysteries or romance novels or children's books or sci-fi or fantasy or whatever, but when you're pitching a book, the thing you are trying to do is get the person on the other end of the pitch, the listener, the recipient, whatever you want to call them, the other human being you're connecting to. You're just trying to get them to feel something. Now, you get to choose what it is that something is. I'm trying to get you to feel happy. I'm trying to get you to feel interested. I'm trying to get you to feel, shocked or worried or something. You've got an idea. You've got a feeling you're aiming for. How you choose to do that is individual to both the writer and the method you use to communicate that pitch and what that pitch entails. So look at any terrestrial television commercial. I know. They're atrocious. I know. But the ones that work are the ones that provoke a feeling in you. Even if that feeling is, ugh, who the hell buys that shit? Counts, totally counts. Let it count. So one resource, watch commercials. I suppose you could just watch them on YouTube. Sure, let's do that. 2, second thing, and I swear none of these 3 things are going to be wrestling. I promise. This time, we're not going to talk about wrestling. Instead, what we're going to talk about are other sports. Haha. So, sports announcing, in particular sports promo, where they tell you like the upcoming games, particularly like on Sundays in America prior to American football games, where they run hype packages and they talk about who's going to win and what kind of challenges they face and who needs to hit this many yards and do this and do that and all that stuff. That combination of information and delivery is exactly what you need to be thinking about when it comes time to pitch. Not because you need to deliver a density of information, because who the hell wants to hear 45 stats all at once? But because a combination of information plus emotion is clearly critical for a pitch. And sports broadcasting has to entirely command the attention via emotion using information as its source. So, item number 2, sports broadcasting. It doesn't matter what the sport is, although I am partial to American football because I think it's a great sport. But hockey also does this as well. Really, any sport that runs some kind of promo or has any kind of sort of setup to it, where it's not just like you turn it on and there you go and people are just like in the sport. Anything with prep and setup there is effective. But let's look at something that's a bit different. Let's look at something that's a bit outside the norm, shall we? Let's get away from sports. Let's get away from television. Let's look at a business that is entirely built on pitching. And instead of highlighting, hey, this stuff works well, I want to show you something that generally tends to fail more often than succeed, because I want you to be aware that the vast majority of the responses you're going to get to pitches will be negative. That's not because you weren't necessarily a bad person or you've created a bad thing that shouldn't be pitched or that your pitch is blow. It's that you're just going to face more no's than yeses in this creative effort, because what you're trying to elicit from the other person is a subjective opinion that's agreeing with you. It's an opinion. People have loads of them and they vary. I want you to go look at, I'll give you a choice here. How's that? You can either go check out real estate people. Yeah, I know. it's land and therefore capital, and you should maybe hit somebody in that knees with a hammer over it. But at the same time, real estate people, especially people who are particularly hungry to hustle, I want to make sure I'm using that phrase correctly, they face a lot of no's. They face a really uphill battle. And their pitch quality and their flexibility in pitching and their ability to pivot and move to the next person, even if it's in a predatory way, makes a difference and can teach you a lot about, oh, don't be anything like those people. The other option, and I hadn't really thought about this until earlier today when I was having a conversation with someone, people who have an Etsy shop, they have to constantly learn to balance the pitch between, hey, here's my individual product, and hey, here, come check out my shop, because they have to push against not only two. Question 2, sort of related because it talks about variability in things. If every query can be different every time, meaning you can constantly change it up, how do I know when I've written a good query? Well, on one hand, it's a good query when it gets the response you want. That's maybe a little too obvious, right? That's maybe a little bit too simple. Let's make it not so simple. You've written a good query when you are able to some degree, evoke interest from another person. But you say, how will I know I've evoked interest? Maybe, how am I going to know? You don't. You've just got to try. That's part of the whole querying process. You're casting your, I'm going to use a fishing metaphor, your lure out into the water, and who knows if you'll get a bite until you get a bite. We have now also taxed the complete amount of fishing knowledge I have. Suffice to say, the point's still valid. You've got a good one when you get the response you want, and you have to trust that you've written a good one that is good enough for you to, try it in the first place. So it's a combination of you feeling good about it, not arrogant about it, not overconfident about it, just less nervous, more comfortable, or when you get the response you want. And yes, absolutely, you should always have a different query. You're querying 10 people? Guess what? I recommend you make 10 queries. I understand it's totally a bummer. It sounds like a lot of work. Oh my God, why would I say such a thing? 2 reasons. One, you should always be willing to query more. More hooks in the water mean more fish caught, if we again use our fishing metaphor. More queries out there mean possibly more responses. Isn't that what you want? And 2, getting better at querying only happens when you query. You're not going to spontaneously become a better querent just because you get better at writing chapter 2 action scenes. Querying breeds better querying, so write more queries. Also, over time, they do get substantially easier if you're willing to give yourself a bit of a break in terms of it not needing to be perfect. But that's really something that's going to come up in a later question for sure. But for now, you've written a good one when you get the response you want. What an awesome second question. On to the third. A bit technical. I love a technical question. How do I build better suspense in my second act? Now, it doesn't matter if we're talking mystery suspense or action suspense or horror or whatever. Just suspense in general, no matter what, is built by manipulating potential. Suspense has to do with the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know the degree to which it's going to happen. We project and we worry and we feel that, oh no, what's lurking behind the corner? What could happen next? Who knows? How long will this uncomfortable feeling last? That's up to the author to control. There's a couple different ways to manage that suspense, to sort of ride the level, if we can use a technical term, and modulate it to some degree. I think the 2 best solutions I have for you, the best 2 tools for your toolbox here are, 1, you can actually build better suspense by reducing the number of things to be suspenseful about. I see in a lot of manuscripts, especially a lot of newer writers with their first book, they want to clutter the field. They have 25 fucking things going on. They've got big clues and complicated stories and all this extra stuff. And what about this scene? And what about this red herring? And what about that? And what about this guy? And those two guys over there and this thing over here. And they've just thrown the whole kitchen sink at the wall. They've got a million things going on in this book because they're desperate. They're desperate to try and get the reader to stay active and stay engaged because they're so worried that any second the reader, who's already bought their book or is already like 100 pages in, is suddenly going to go, oh, screw this, and leave when they don't, because readers don't work that way. The YouTube feed stopped working? Well, shit. I have no control over the YouTube feed. Literally, I have nothing I can do with the YouTube feed. I apologize. I don't think I do. I have nothing. I have nothing. I'm so sorry. What a bummer that is. Hopefully the recording will keep recording and I'll just manually upload it if I need to. Thank you for letting me know. That blows. Let me just click this real quick. Yeah, it did. Look at that. Apparently it'll come back, or so it says. There was a hiccup in Twitch too. You had to restart the app. Yeah. Okay. That might be, I don't know. I apologize for technical errors. There is still going to be at least a recording, and worst case scenario, I'm talking to myself tonight, and I'll just upload everything. But that's fine. It's all good. I'm going back to this question, though. How do I build suspense in my second act? Reduce the number of things to be suspenseful about so you can focus the suspense where you need it. Because you really don't need 25 things. Because if you look at the majority of stories you consume outside your own work, the number of things to be suspenseful about, probably less than 10 total. A couple action scenes, a tense fight in the climax, maybe a mystery or a challenge across the story as a whole, maybe 2. What's that, 2 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1? 6-ish things. Thank you so much for subscribing. It's delightful to have you here. You've subscribed for 2 months. I'm very happy to have you back. You're amazing. So what, 2 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1? 2 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. That's 5. That's nowhere near 20. That's not even close to double digits. So, yeah. Step 1, reduce the number of things to be suspenseful about. You'll have the ability to be more suspenseful because you'll be able to dial in and focus on them. 2, you manage suspense not by parceling out specific detail, i.e. don't paint a picture where you're painting every inch of everything with adjectives to death, but you are sustaining things. So rather than repeat yourself, like the room is dark, the dark room is dark, the dark room is dark and dark and dark, like we're taking the same point and belaboring it, find different ways instead of expressing just the dark. Yeah, I am now live and streaming. This seems to be a thing we are going to deal with technical hiccups all evening. Isn't that exciting? I apologize. As I had mentioned earlier, we are in a state of transition over here at Writer Next Door when it comes to software. So let's just cross our fingers that the duct tape and spit holds together. Anyway, back to our suspense question. Rather than belabor the same point because we want everybody to be worried about what's in the dark, we want to talk about why we're worried about what's in the dark. To just tell everybody that it's dark a million times does not, by nature, create any kind of suspense until we give the reader an opportunity to worry about what's in the dark. So if you've got this dark room and your character's walking around and the flashlight is intermittent, yes, you do want to have some detail about the intermittent flashlight, but if you're trying to build how the character feels, you got to get in the character's head. So you affect your suspense, you ratchet up your suspense by creating a context for it that the reader can fill in the blanks with. They're going to be wrong. We want them to be wrong. We want them to not know shit. We want them to not know what's going on. We want it to be unknown. So that they can go, well, maybe the killer's behind this corner. Maybe the, killer's behind this door. Because we want to constantly create this sense of maybe they're over here. Or maybe they're over there. And it doesn't ultimately matter, but we are always affecting tension because we are allowing the reader to fill in some of the gaps that we are leaving open by not beating the description horse to death with a big stick. You affect suspense by creating context. Say it again. You affect suspense by creating context. Because why should I be scared about a thing is a very valid question the reader's going to ask. And the depths of description you generate will not necessarily answer that question. Don't confuse a why, as in why should I be scared, with a what, something you're describing. Not all whys get answered with whats. And I know that's going to come back in a later question tonight. But that is how you build better suspense. Create context. Let the reader project a little. Don't over micromanage. Loosen up. It takes practice. That's why we have more than one draft. On we go. Are there... Apparently the YouTube stream is back now. At least that's the note I'm seeing on my screen. Are there any questions? Twitch, Zoom, YouTube. While you're pondering your questions, I'm going to chug this cup of tea. Because dinner was good, but it was a little salty. Questions about anything. By the way, if you're totally new, by the way, you can ask questions about anything. You can ask me how the cats are doing. We can talk about a book. We can talk about your book. We can talk about damn near anything. Questions. Somebody had one.
Is it okay I went audio?
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine. What's up?
Okay, I had a marketing question.
I love marketing questions. Let's go.
All right, so there is a TikToker that I follow. She is a published author, and I've shared a couple of her videos in the Discord before. But today she had posted one that was her publisher asking her to develop a marketing strategy, come up with media contacts, and a list of social media influencers and or best-selling authors that she could promote her book to. Is that something that is pretty common when it comes to a publisher asking for the author to do that type of footwork?
Yes.
Because she seemed to think that it was like, hey, that's all your job.
No. Okay. That's an awesome question. And let's be real clear about this. It's the author's job. It's the author's job. The publisher's job is to publish the book. They're going to do all the stuff that turns the manuscript into a physical product or a digital product or both. Their job is to make the book a book and ship it to places and put it in stores and then sell it and then do that stuff. And when I say sell it, I mean physically distribute it in exchange for currency. And they will do, to some degree, some percentage, I don't know what percentage, every publisher is different, but it's never going to be 100. Some percentage of marketing is sort of inherent in that, because in order to sell a thing, you got to talk about a thing. So they're going to do a little bit of marketing, even if that marketing is just, hey, show the cover of the book on the shelf when you stick it on the shelf. Or it's going to be, promoted in a big one-page ad or something. But the more specific campaigns, hey, write a blog post. Hey, get this out. Who can you talk to? Let's get you hooked up with an interview. Those things more and more fall on the writer to organize and do. Now, in a smaller publisher, it falls to the writer to do because there's not going to be enough people at a smaller publisher to handle that, because that takes time. And I've been a one-man marketing department for some publishers, and there's just, if you've got 3 or 4 books you're trying to both edit and finalize art on and figure out release schedules and pay for, you don't have enough time to individually go to every author and go, hey, you're dealing with this audience, let's go talk to them. Hey, you're dealing with that audience, let's go talk to them. You need, as a writer, to understand that there is an expectation now that you are going to pick up the marketing ball and run with it. And if that's a real problem for you, well, then you are going to suffer the consequences of that being a real problem for you. Principally being, you're not going to reach as many people as you could if, you decided you were able to market your own work. Also, from just a technical standpoint, you're the author of the book. Who knows the book better than you? Who can speak to the book's intricacies in a number of ways? than you. I'm happy to talk about my clients' books. I can do it effectively and passionately. I do all the time, but it's never going to be the same as me saying, hey, you know who you should talk to about this book? The person who wrote it. Because I might have the passion, I might have some of the details, but they can tell you what it was like to write chapter 15 twice. They can tell you what it was like to agonize for 4 months over the ending. An author will always be the most effective marketing tool. Now, let's comrades, let's talk capitalism for a minute. Why would a publisher do this? Because it saves them the trouble of paying marketing people. Because publishers don't want to market books, they just want to sell books. Marketing is the unfortunate necessity for them. Yeah, I guess we got to talk about your shit in order for your shit to get bought, I guess. Because what they're concerned about is how long will it take to make the money back that I just spent in printing these copies or shipping them somewhere or making it available? How long will it take to make the money back on the Facebook ad I just put together? That's their question. That's their issue. They're not in this so that you and your besties can go have a Kappa fucking chino or whatever sometime. They're in this for the money. It's a money thing for them. And that's not necessarily, the best human trait in the business, but it's just what they're there for. Marketing is your department. And you as a writer, not just you specifically, Jen, but I mean like people, embrace that. Grab it. Do it. Because if you're looking at it going, oh my God, it's so hard. What am I going to do? Get help. Ask for help. Who would you ask for help? Hi, I'm right here. There are loads of people like me. Well, there are loads of people who do what I do. There are very few people like me. But you can get help from marketing. You can look at TikTok as a marketing platform. You can look at Instagram as a marketing platform. You can look at other marketing platforms. You can get creative with things. You need to get creative with things. Remember, once you publish this book, once you're done the writing, you are not done the marathon. To be an effective writer in the current era of writing and publishing, whether you are traditionally publishing and especially if you're self-publishing, you have to remember this is a business. And the other half of your business is to promote promote the work that you produced. So yeah, you got to do your marketing. And all the people who love to, what we referred to, and here's your technical term for the night, BPM. If you ever get an editorial note like BPM marketing, you bitch, piss, and moan for marketing, means you don't want to do it. You complain about it a lot. You generally get bumped down in priority, because why would I want to deal with the crabby person who complains about every time I tell you that you have to tweet about your shit? Let me go talk to the people who are excited. I'll talk to them more because they don't make me want to like smash my face with a cheese grater. Whereas the author who's like, oh my God, I hate marketing. It's so hard, you guys. Oh, this is so unfair. I don't want to do it. Isn't it your job? They're the ones who make me regret my life choices. And I very seldom need help regretting my life choices. But all the same, you're an author. You have to publish your books and you got to promote your books. Even though they're doing all the printing and the labor for that end, you still have to get the word out about them. So yeah, it's totally, your job. Good question. Thank you for letting me explain that. That's needs to be said way more often.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for explaining all that for us.
Absolutely. Other questions? Yes, there are 3 pints of tea, by the way, so I'm just hella hydrating. Questions? Twitch, I see you. Hey. We good? You want to keep going? It's cool, because if you think of questions, just drop them in chat. What kind of tea is it tonight? Oh, the most important of all questions. Tonight's tea is South African orange. It's kind of smoky. It's not really like strong orange. It's like a subtle orange. It's in there, like I can taste it. But it's orange in the same way that, like, remember those candies that used to come in the little metal round puck? Like your grandma's orange candies? Well, it was my grandma's orange candies. I don't know about your orange candies. But it was like this sort of smoky, subtle orange, and you could suck on it for hours. It was maybe raspberry or watermelon, too. But my grandma had orange ones. It's a lot like that, but it's also got like a real earthy, kind of like strong tea flavor. It's my second favorite Big fan. Good question. Thank you for asking. Welcome to Tea Talk, by the way. One day I will probably get a t-shirt with that. What's the best way to approach a writer you admire to ask for advice? It depends on the advice you're asking for. I mean, it's a good question. It's a really good question. Well, Rob, it does depend on what kind of advice you're asking. Like if you're asking a writer, first of all, if you're asking, let's say, a horror writer how to better write horror, you want to make sure you're going to ask a specific and clear question. Specific and clear. Don't just say, how do you do what you do? Or the standby at every author tour is, where do you get your ideas from? Because no, sit back down. No, like a dog. Just no, stop it. The best way to approach a writer is to ask sincere, specific, and clear questions. Hi, thank you so much for your time. I hope you're doing well. Do you have a moment for a question? Now, granted, I'm assuming the author has not said, hey, does anybody have any questions? But if they have, hey, I'm answering questions on Twitter, hit me with this hashtag and let's go. Well, then you just go right to your question and you make sure your question is specific and clear. Do you find it really difficult to have to juggle the, multiple trains of thought when you're writing for characters in third person omniscient? There's nothing wrong with that question. It's way better than, is it real hard to be a writer? You want to be clear and specific. Now, if you're cold approaching them, because let's say they're not on Twitter going like, hey, use hashtag ask author name and I'll answer your questions or whatever. Like you're kind of playing by ear, essentially. Hi, thanks so much. I really hope I'm not bothering you. I just have a question. I'm a writer. I'm in the middle of, this draft, and I keep looking at your work because I love your work and it's great. And I think the world of it. And you've always seemed to be to me the sort of person I could ask a question of if I had a chance. And now I have a chance. So I hope you don't mind me asking this question. Insert question here. I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much. I hope you keep creating good stuff. I look forward to your next book, whatever it might be. Bing, bang, boom, you're done. You just ask kindly. Think about what you would say to somebody who came to ask you, Rob. Hey, Rob, how do we do whatever it is you do? If somebody rocked up and you was like, hey, yo, how do you do the thing? You'd probably handle that differently than if somebody was like, Rob, what's it like to really navigate this messy, stressful thing that you have going on? Your first and best tool for communicating with other writers, we sort of talked about this on Monday, is your ability to build a connection with them. So be kind. You don't have to constantly warm up your question with an apology. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I hope I'm not bothering you. No, you're writing an email. Just write the email. Let's go. Not that you have to jump right to the point because these people are so super busy. You need to be devoid of humanity. But you don't have to apologize for liking their stuff or wanting to feel encouraged or even emboldened to ask for help. Because at some point, it's very likely that they were somebody who asked for help. It's also very possible that nobody asks them questions, but they give off some kind of aura that everybody must be knocking down their door. So the best thing you can do is ask. You just ask kindly. Just be clear. I can tell you from experience, it's what I do. You're a person writing another person a note. Practice. Great question. Let's go march on to question 4. John, what do you think holds back the typical writer? Oh, we've come to the spicy portion of the evening. How delightful. All right. Here's what I think holds back the typical writer. Flat out, I think the average writer is too quick to discredit themselves and too quick to assume their work is starting off or ending up negatively rather than positively. I think what holds back the typical writer is themselves. My Twitch is doing something cool and it makes it sound like you're rapping, but I think I got the point. All right, so this appears to be an evening where we're just going to all be fighting technology. How wonderful for us all. Sucks. I'm sorry. I apologize for the technical difficulties over which I have no control. But I hope, in the end, Rob likes my answer about being compassionate. Back to question 4. I think the typical writer holds the typical writer back because in some cases, writing can be really easy. And we inflate things in our heads like it has to be more difficult than it is. No, you're just writing down an imaginary conversation. But other times, we find out that it isn't easy. Because while, yeah, we are writing down an imaginary conversation in our heads, we are doing it in a way so that that imaginary conversation ends up in somebody else's head. And that's real hard. It gets easier with practice. It gets easier over time. It gets easier with experience and more tools in the toolbox. But I think too many writers look at that, and when it's easy, whatever it is they're making, or when it's easier than other parts, they downplay it. Oh, well, you know, it's okay. I kind of sort of did this. It's fine. But when it's real hard, they use the difficulty as some kind of verification that they're terrible. Well, you know, of course I'm struggling with it. I mean, it's like hard and stuff. I think, honestly, the best tool to give a new writer, other than the support, the technical support, to allow them to like answer questions and figure out how to contextually do things better on the page. The other thing they need is they need a cheerleader. Somebody who's going to stand there and go, yeah, you're doing great. Keep doing it like that. Or do it like this, maybe with fewer commas or shorter sentences. But you're doing great. Keep going. The encouragement level, the support level, the idea that you're not alone as a writer is remarkably helpful, because there are times, even though writing is itself an isolating practice, because you're just sitting there writing by yourself, the idea that you can get support, I think, defeats some of the fears writers use to hold themselves back. The idea that, oh, well, it's probably not any good. Who's going to read this? I don't know. Let's find out. The important thing here is that most likely the thing holding you back is some kind of fear. Fear of a rejection, fear of response, fear of success, fear of it working out, or fear of it working out not in the way you expect, fear of discovering that you've somehow wasted your time even though it made you happy to do this thing, but somehow that means you've wasted your time because capitalism. I don't know. But chances are the thing you are trying to pre-anticipate, that's probably not the right word. That doesn't sound right at all. But the thing you were trying to like work around before it's even here, I guess it is anticipate, is a fear. You're trying to avoid the idea that you're going to be rejected by trying too hard to write the perfect thing. You're trying to make sure you succeed, but only this much. So you're not going to market too hard, so you're going to downplay your marketing efforts, even though you swear up and down it's real important to you. You're going to find different reasons to stall on a project or start 5 new projects and not finish any of them because you're really worried about what would happen if you finished. Or you just are so used to being somebody who says they're going to do a thing and then doesn't do a thing that changing that pattern about yourself is real difficult. So you're afraid of being found out or rejected or succeeding or changing who you are for the better because it's uncomfortable because you're stepping out of your regular space. So you find reasons to not to. I think fear holds back the typical writer, and I think they generate their own fear. Because by and large, publishing as a structure, as a societal, civilizational thing, needs writers. Because otherwise, how are books going to go? How are stories going to get told without the storyteller? You need writers. The fears we manufacture and the fears we hyper-develop, that's where I think something like support and some honesty go a long way to straighten out. Maybe not completely abolish, because I think that's still, that ultimate abolition, I think, still comes down to the writer themselves. But it certainly goes a long way to know that, oh, this person has my back. Oh, I have this as a resource. Oh, I can use this as a tool to help me. I'm not feeling so alone or so lost or so overwhelmed. I think that's real significant. And I think that's how we help give writers more tools to succeed in more ways. Also, as a side note, as a bonus to this question, I think the harder we work to eliminate the idea of perfection, it doesn't need to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. You don't have to give yourself an aneurysm or a complex trying to make it perfect, that you can just do what you want to do and do how you're going to do it to the best of your ability, and that's going to be good enough. I think that also goes a long way to eliminate some of the shackles and tethers writers feel they need to adopt in order to be what they think a writer is. Amazing, spicy question. Super happy to answer it. On to 5. Oh, man. We're at the porn question, you guys. We're at the porn question. Oh, wow. We finally made it. I guess, yeah, I should tell you. So there's an ongoing giant list of questions. I get it in my Twitter DMs. I get it in my Instagram DMs. I get emails. There used to be a whole channel on the Discord, and I compile it all in one place. Is there a sound effect? Well, there would be, but I'm pretty sure it would violate the Twitch terms of service. Let's see if there's a sound effect. Hang on. Yeah, there's a sound effect.
Hoo-ah!
There you go. There you go. There is your graphic porn sound.
Hoo-ah!
I'll take it. In a sex scene, how graphic can I get? Yes. You can get as graphic as you want. Just understand why you're getting graphic. Your job, and this is going to come up in a later question, almost verbatim, your job is to put a picture in the reader's head. Once you've done that, the extra bells and whistles you've attached to that picture maybe don't serve the reader. And I'm not saying that so that you do the bare minimum describing. But you got to think about, like, what's the intended effect you have of being extra graphic? Like, a little graphic, fine, because at some point you're describing a fairly, what can be described as a physically aggressive act. Body parts coming together, bodies in motion. There's some kind of almost combative nature to it, depending on how you frame it. There's certainly a physicality that can lead to a level of mental picturing of things. This is, of course, compounded when we get into euphemisms, because we're all afraid to talk about body parts or describe things in certain ways. Euphemisms water this down and make it far harder and more difficult. But for now, just understand that when you're describing stuff, that extra level of description, that extra level of, like, hyper detail, and yes, I'm intentionally trying to spare the listeners of this particular answer, like, what I'm talking about, like the extra textures and the extra shapes and sizes and this is and that's and any other sensory information. I mean, all that stuff, it's technically accurate because in the scene, these are the things that happen. So a lot of writers, I should say, feel like the reader needs to know the precise, three-dimensional space coordinates where this event happens, or the degree to which this angle is, or the force of Newton's generated. It's Newton's, right? The force generated by this particular movement. But ultimately, truly, is that what you want the reader to know in the moment? It's a sex scene between characters. Are we going to care about foot-pounds of torque? Or is it more important that we get caught up in the emotion of the sensations than the physical logistics of, like, oh, well, then this thing turns here this way with this person doing this, and then their foot goes here, and then they do this thing, and then they say the magic phrase, and the blah, 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 blah. You can get as graphic as you want. But the question editorially is going to come down to, what are you hoping extra graphic detail is giving this scene? As a side note, even in the most deep and dark of erotica waters, it's barely as graphic as you think, except for isolated moments that are intended to be graphic, because the whole point of describing a certain point in an act is the reason you're reading the whole thing in the first place. So you're going to get graphic detail at the beginning of things, at the end of things, when certain events occur, when certain events don't occur. That's when you'll get graphic. But by and large, to be graphic through the whole activity, whatever it might be, it just feels gratuitous. And it feels, as we will talk about with a later question, it just feels like the writer is desperately trying to keep the reader's focus. But be as graphic as you want. Just make sure you know why you're being that graphic. Yay, porn question.
Hoo-ah!
On we go to another. Oh my God, gentle advice. We're here already. Now, I'm going to do the harp again. I know the people who most like the harp sound are busy doing a thing. They were nice enough to send me a text that they were missing out on the harp thing. So, Allie, here's your harp thing. I know how much it means to you. All right. Gentle advice. Are writing prompts bad? No, but they are not by themselves bad. They're just things. However, and this is important, if you're writing a book and you're deep in your draft, doing your own thing, why do you need a writing prompt? Isn't your work enough of a prompt? Isn't thinking about what's coming next enough of a prompt? Now wait, maybe you're about to tell me, but John, I need these prompts. They limber me up creatively. They shake off the cobwebs. They get me thinking about my work. Wait, hang on. Are you telling me that you're not thinking about your work usually? Well, John, you got to understand it's my day job. It's this other stuff. I get to package myself so tightly, and my creativity is so restricted. I feel like I need a prompt to get into the space so that I can go write my thing. Isn't writing your thing gonna loosen you up because you're doing it? You know, if I need to get better at swimming in a pool, shouldn't I be in a pool to loosen up to swim better? Well, the prompt excites me. Okay, do you mean to say that you're not excited by your work? Writing prompts by and large are not bad, but a writer's constant need for them and reliance on them in place of the excitement or potential of their own work can really be detrimental. I talk to a lot of writers who want prompts the same degree I used to want pills and heroin. You got any prompts? You got prompts? Man, I need some prompts. We should make a list of prompts every month. I got to have prompts. I got to have prompts. Why? Aren't you writing a book? Isn't that enough of a prompt? For some people, a prompt is a lot like that elephant and the stake and the rope analogy, where you get so used to being tied to it, you get so used to being able to only move in a certain way, you feel like you need that in order to move at all. But for others, what are you doing? Really, what are you doing? They're not bad. You're not bad for doing them. But at some point, isn't it time you started doing your own stuff? Because you can work on your book. You can write in your manuscript, and it can be bad. It can be shitty drafting. It doesn't have to be perfect in order to belong in the manuscript, and it's not like the manuscript should only contain perfect sentences. You can write a scene badly. You can write a whole book badly if you want to. That's why we have multiple drafts. If you want to start a separate file and then write some scenes and then paste them into a manuscript, that's fine too. But of course, that steps far away from the answer or the question about writing prompts to begin with. I don't think, again, this is John's opinion corner. If you've been doing this more than 60 days and you are not brandy new to writing, I don't think a prompt's going to serve you. I think a prompt's going to hold you back. Now, if we're talking about a contest or we're talking about some event where you've got, there's some money on the line or some bragging rights, or you're just trying to like hang out with your friends and kick a cipher. Yeah, sure. Then yeah, prompt away, man. Do what you got to do. But by and large, in terms of developing your craft, in terms of really pushing yourself, nothing's going to push yourself like your own work. Just think that over. But I don't think writing prompts are bad. I just don't want to see everybody run to them like water in the oasis. Oh my God, more questions. Anybody? Zoom, Twitch, YouTube, assuming you're functional. I can't tell. Sometimes it's lit. Sometimes it's not lit. Who knows? Questions, anybody? We've moved on to pint glass number 2, so. What I want to do, I should have put the graphic for questions from Discord up, because there was a Discord question that somebody asked me early this morning, and they didn't say whether they wanted me to write them an answer or read or like say the answer. So I'm going to say it and then I'll write it later. But here we go. Question is this: when I'm creating a novel with multiple species in it, should I have information about the lore in those species that everybody should want to know? Or should it be left to some sort of like mystery? Or should I make like one of those wiki things about my stuff? Okay. Everybody buckle up, because we're going to go for a small ride here. By and large, this is not a bad question, but it screams to me, hey, I'm trying to do I'm taking the longest way possible through a part of writing that needs to be talked about. I hate to tell you this. I really and truly hate to tell you. You are the only one who's going to care as much as you care about the stuff you make. The reader, if you invent new rabbits, right? You invent a new species of being. The reader is probably not going to sit there and go, oh shit, I wonder if they have a rich and complex history. Because they're going to go, that's a rabbit, and then they're going to move on with the book. There's nothing wrong with creating that stuff. It's wonderful that you create that stuff. If you're, doing other creative things, you want to draw on a lot of need to know everything you know. We just don't. It just don't. It's great that you have this level of detail. I'm happy for you. I'm proud that you've been that creative. It's awesome. There are some real benefits to being that creative. But dumping it into your book is not necessarily the best place or the best opportunity for that creativity. If you're about to go, hey, John, what is a good place for that creativity? Supplemental art, marketing materials, your book cover, the D&D campaign you're running for your friends, the other role-playing games, because D&D is not the be-all and end-all. It's an okay game. There are better ones out there to do with the same things. But, the role-playing game you're playing with your friends, the RP server you're on for your various MMOs, all that stuff, totally legit. Great, good for you, make you happy. But the reader isn't coming to your book to try and generate this sort of, I'm going to date myself, this Encyclopedia Britannica, this sum total of all knowledge. Because that's not what they're there for. They're there for a story. They're there to be moved emotionally. Being informed and being aware of stuff is part of that process, but not necessarily the whole process. So please don't go out of your way to make a wiki about your shit when it's your first book and no one really knows who you are and you're not marketing it. There's better ways to spend your time, like marketing your story. And they're not going to have as many questions about the bunnies you make because it won't occur to them to have questions about the bunnies you have in the background of two scenes in the park in the first 3 chapters of your book, because that's not what your book's about, probably. So you don't need to dive deep on the lore, because as we talk about with a later question, it's going to have an adverse rather than positive effect on the reader. So no, don't do any of those things. Just write your story. Just write your story. It'll be fine. All right. Other questions? Else we will march on to question 7. I have to tell you, I'm really looking forward to better software where I don't have to do all this stupid scrolling. But that's more of a future John excitement point. All right, question 7. I think this is the question where in my initial rehearsal today, I just started swearing a lot. I think that's this one. Should I publish a few short stories on my blog to help promote my not yet or about to be published novel? Okay. Yeah, this is the swearing question. Strap in, everybody, if you're unstrapped. The minute you publish a thing on a blog, it's published, you're a published author, you've published work. Period. Done. It's done. You published. Hooray. That's why the button on the website is called publish. You published. Publishing supplemental work about your not yet published novel can be really helpful, especially if you're going to self-publish that novel. And it can be really helpful if when the book comes out, you have other stuff you can use in marketing and promotions as well as community generating on a website. But you don't have to do that. And if you're the sort of writer who's generating this sort of what's called lateral content, meaning it's to the left and right, it is to the sides of your main project rather than making forward content, meaning you're working on the book itself. If you're generating a lot of lateral content in place of moving forward, you're making life harder on yourself. There is not necessarily an automatic benefit to creating short stories for your blog if you don't have blog traffic to read them. Just because you're going to publish a novel, it's going to be up on Amazon or whatever, and you're going to have this sales link, does not automatically mean that the world's going to come beat a path to your .com blog. I would love if that were the case. I've got a .com. A few people check it out. I wish more people checked it out. And I'm sure, when I relaunch the blog and the newsletter, coming soon, that hopefully people will come back to check it out. But by and large, you can't guarantee that just because, oh, by the way, this thing's available, let's say merch, this thing's available, they're going to go check everything out. You want them to, but that doesn't make it so. There are also concerns from some traditional publishing avenues that if you're creating lateral content on your blog and you're trying to traditionally publish your novel, you are essentially crossing the streams in terms of publishing and possibly creating for some publishers a reason to not publish your book. Because, hey, if you're just producing short stories on your blog, well, why don't you just self-publish the novel? Again, this is one of the big discrepancies between self-publishing and traditional publishing. Both sides are always looking for an advantage, I'm making air quotes, an advantage in the process to lure producers of content, writers, to one side or the other. I can't say you definitely should, but in some cases, for some intents, if there's an audience and if there's awareness, yeah, sure, more content laterally can help if you've already got a good base underneath you. Meaning you've got a strong blog, or you've got a strong community of people who will consistently check in with you, or you've got a strong newsletter, or you've got a good sales base or something. Then extra content to whet the palate or hype people up or keep people engaged is great. But if you are new at this and you are working up that hill for the very first time, sometimes this can be a real hindrance. Because if you're writing this lateral stuff in place of the forward progress, it's one of those things where it sounds like you're totally helping yourself out, but really what you're doing is making it harder to move forward because you keep finding new things to distract yourself. Oh, I know I got to work on the main book, but I'm also neck deep in the short story. Now the short story is threatening to turn into its own novel. Well, how serious were you about the first book? That's the big red flag here. That's the big giant alarm going off. Be really careful, especially when you're getting started. Be really careful about the things that pull your attention too far away too frequently. It will make a big difference. What a great question, though. And I did it with far less swearing than this morning. Go me. On to question 8. What's an effective way of organizing feedback from beta readers? I love this question because this is a question I get asked a lot by people who are deeply panicking. And I don't want to make light of somebody panicking about this, but it always seems to come up only when people are freaking out. Nobody's asking this before this happens. We only seem to get to this question once they're inundated with feedback. I guess that's just the nature of how people solicit feedback. Who knows? But what's the effective way of organizing feedback? Well, it's like this. Most of the time, people want to organize that feedback into different groups. We're always looking for a way to categorize material. The easiest categories for feedback have to do with your characters, your plot, and your world building. You know, the story triangle, the thing we talk about on Monday nights, the fundamental pillars of story, right? We can sort stuff that way. This has to do with characters, put it over there. This has to do with world, put it on that pile. This has to do with plot, put it on that pile. No matter what it's specifically about, we start to categorize it just by that one thing. Cool. And then, once we sort all your stuff into those 3 groups, then we break it down. Okay, so we take just the character stuff. This is about the main characters. Put that in a pile. This is about secondary characters. Put that in a pile. This is about the bad guy. Put that in a pile. This doesn't go in any pile. It goes into its own pile. And then one at a time, we work through each of those piles. So here's a comment about, here's some feedback that our main character's motivation is unclear. Okay. Do I have in this main character unclear, main character pile, do I have any other people highlighting that the motivation is unclear? Yes, no. However many people you have, however much feedback you have, just see if that one particular issue comes up for multiple people. Because if it does, if that issue makes an appearance for other people, it does not necessarily 1,000,000,000% mean you must do something about it, because ultimately that choice is always yours. It's just really, really a good candidate to have something done about it. If 6 of 10 people are telling you, hey, the motivation here is maybe not the clearest, then yeah, you might want to consider that as a thing you definitely prioritize when it comes to revision. But if one person is just telling you like, hey, I don't get why your character made this choice in this scene, but 9 other people don't mention it at all, it's up to you to decide, like, 9's bigger than 1. I don't really need to go into it. Or, yeah, I guess maybe I could say something about it, and then just make the change if you want. Making change based on feedback is always up to you. You're the writer. You're the one who has to do the rewriting. So even if 10 people out of 10 told you, like, hey, I don't think your plot resolves the way it does, you don't have to do anything about it. You can leave it alone. Maybe it'll work. Maybe these 10 out of the next 100 were just the outliers. Who knows? But not all feedback needs to be acted on, and certainly not all feedback needs to be acted on immediately. And this brings up a really important thing, to the point where I will probably do an entire Monday night stream on it, but I'll give you the highlights now. Way back in the day on Twitter, like way back, I broke down feedback into 4 types. Positive helpful, positive unhelpful, negative helpful, negative unhelpful. Let's cover each of these groups. So positive, helpful is feedback that is encouraging and supportive and helps resolve a problem. Hey, I love this book. It's really awesome. I think, though, that your motivation for your main character is off. My question is specifically about, why are they making the choice they're making? It gives you something to do. It gives you some vector to take, some approach you can take for your work. Positive, unhelpful is stuff that is feedback that's supportive, but is either really vague, or you can preface it with, if I were writing the story, ... I would do whatever. Positive, unhelpful ranges from like, it's nice, I liked it, it was good. That's the vague stuff. All the way to, yeah, I really think the character should have a flying car. Because if they were writing the story, that's what they'd do. Positive, unhelpful can feel nice, but it's often material that doesn't necessarily help the picture you have in your head. It helps develop or embellish a picture somebody else has in their head, and they're trying to port it over to yours. Negative, helpful feedback is stuff that's tough to hear, but ultimately makes a better story. Yeah, this didn't work for me because I think your big plot twist is spoiled based on the comments the things your characters did 10 chapters in. And we're looking for specificity with this stuff. Because it's the stuff that you didn't want to hear, it's the stuff that's upsetting, the stuff that stresses you out, the stuff that's a real problem, but at the same time, it gives you a vector so that you can do something about it. It might not be the easiest something to do, but it's something to do. And then negative, unhelpful is the stuff you flat out ignore. Oh, this sucks, bro. I didn't like it, whatever. I think this book's terrible. What are you doing? Or it's stuff that is so arrogant in its delivery or so condescending in its tone that the changes they're recommending or the ideas that they're giving you totally don't fit with what you want to do, totally don't give you anything to work with, and really just sound like the person wants to hog the spotlight in your feedback circle. Ignore it. Don't even clock it. Don't even give it the time of day. Think about those 4 quadrants. Think about those 4 types of feedback with every piece of feedback you get. Character, antagonist, plot, world. Break it down. See what common things repeat. Now, if for some reason in all your feedback, every single person is highlighting a different thing every time, which I guess mathematically could happen, but if everybody's highlighting, 10 people are highlighting 10 different things, do not draw the conclusion that this is terrible because 10 people found 10 things and therefore 100 things must be wrong. Figure out if what you're trying to do is being accomplished. And what changes, what ideas, what suggestions, what revisions, what stuff comes to mind in some of the feedback. Well, if I use this person's idea, well, if I answer this person's question, because you do not have to do them all. You do not have to act on every piece of criticism and feedback you get. They'll understand. They'll get over it. You get to pick, ultimately, you get to pick and choose what feedback you act on and to what degree you act on it. But an effective way to organize it is to classify or group or arrange or organize, I don't want to keep using that word, the information into similar piles to reduce the overall paralysis of just like, oh my God, I've got 100 things to do. Sort it into pieces. Attack them in groups by size. This is why, by the way, I tell clients to use Google Forms. Rather than just writing a vague email with like, hey, tell me what you thought. Tell me what problems you ran into. Give them a Google form. Ask 10 questions, 12 questions, 8 questions, 20 questions. I don't know. I have a couple different templates for people when they need it. So you ask a predetermined amount of questions tailored in a certain way to ask about things you're curious about. Hey, what did you think about my main character arc? Hey, what did you think about the climax? Did this insert chapter work for you? What was your favorite piece of dialogue? that kind of stuff. So that the beta reader has an opportunity to talk about what worked and what didn't, but they do so on their own terms so that they can feel engaged in the process. And so that you're not dumping on them the whole responsibility of trying to explain back to you your own story, your own pictures. But it starts by organizing the feedback into manageable slices. Great technical question. Oh man, we're here. Oh boy, we're here. The big question of the night. The one we've sort of talked about coming up on previously with other questions. John, question number 9. What is the line between giving too little detail and giving too much detail? First, I'd like to highlight that this question only seems to talk about the extremes. That either we're doing too little or too much. And that whole Goldilocks zone of things is completely overlooked as if it's an impossibility, which is mathematically quantifiably incorrect. There is just as much of a chance that you are doing the right amount as there is doing too little or too much. Also, bringing back some of our earlier points, your job is to put a picture in the reader's head. It doesn't necessarily... Thank you so much for subscribing. I really appreciate it. Your job is to put a picture in the reader's head. The amount of detail you give to do that is fine. It's going to be variable. But it's not necessarily critical that everybody get the same response or give the same response to the detail you're providing, because you can't control that. I'm going to give you an example because I want to resolve this issue, because this question I get maybe on like a monthly basis in a couple different ways, and I want to have one answer I can point to. Because it comes back to that idea of the reader isn't taking a final exam on your book. So being able to regurgitate or fathom a specificity or high quantity of detail doesn't ultimately help them. But let me give you an example. Let me say something and lay something out so that maybe this makes more sense to you. I could tell you specifically the car I drove in high school. It, by the way, was a 1990 Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra in powder blue. I could call it a 1990 Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra in powder blue with wire rims and a few dents in the bumper, because my best friend had this old-ass Ford Bronco, and he would always tap my bumper in the high school parking lot, because that was, or if I was parking behind him, I'd tap his bumper, because we were just dumb kids driving cars. But I could give you the specificity, and I could break down how the paint was peeling off, and I could tell you about how the wheels always squeaked, and how I literally drove that car a certain number of miles until the front axle gave out in the car dealership lot when I traded it in for my next car before I went to college. I could give you all those details. But at the same time, I could also say, because you have no idea what a 1990 Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra in powder blue looks like, and you didn't want to Google image it, because frankly, not everybody's going to, I could just tell you, imagine the boxiest car you would imagine a little old lady to drive in the 90s. Imagine a grandma car, a little bit worn, a little bit tired, small, not exactly the big full-throated super engine, just a little quaint grandma car that at best putters around. And that's good enough. I know it's not the same as the Cutlass Sierra. It's not the same as the Oldsmobile. It's not the same as saying this. But I, the writer, don't need, I'm not going to drop dead. My life is not going to be negatively affected if you don't fully fathom exactly what I need. Because I don't care. I want you to picture a car. I want you to feel like you're in the story. I want you to feel like you're part of things. But the specificity with which I deploy my 1990 Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra in powder blue is not necessarily the best tool to help you engage. So in that case, it might be too much detail. But in other cases, if I'm trying to describe to you the high school parking lot, and, you know, everybody's got, I grew up in a very rich, affluent, very white town, and everybody's got, you know, at the time, Volkswagen convertibles and Beamers and a couple Mercedes and a couple Jaguars and all that. But my father wanted to teach me an important lesson about the value of, you know, hard work. So I inherited his car, the Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra in powder blue. So in that case, if I just say it's the only Oldsmobile in the parking lot, that might be too little detail because you don't have any other frame of reference. Quantity of detail. Let's be real clear here. Quantity of detail does not necessarily guarantee reader facility or better reader experience with the story. This question, well, what's the line between too little and too much? First of all, it's entirely subjective. And it comes down to not only a reader opinion that you can control, but an individual authorial detail that might vary from draft to draft. Your goal as a writer isn't to inundate them with a specific number of words per descriptor, per thing in the story. Your job is to put a picture in their head. And one of the things you have to learn as an author is to not always like grab the reader by the face and demand they eat all the vegetables on their plate. I know I really mixed metaphors there. You don't need to micromanage literally their entire reading experience. It's going to put them off reading if you inundate them with details with little to no function or benefit in the story. Who gives a shit about the details you're producing? We want to try and avoid that space as much as possible, because the minute we start to introduce doubt or frustration in a reader, we lose engagement. And we don't want to lose engagement or trade it or have to feel like we always have to fight for it. So detail the story the way you want to detail it. Get your pictures across in their head. In the editorial process, in the revising process, start to tailor the quantity of words. But in terms of what details you provide conceptually and in what order logistically you provide them, it's incredibly variable. Now, I can tell you editorially, publishing, traditional and self, does not sit here and go, we are expecting exactly this many words and adjectives per thing. Oh, you're writing an action scene? We need to see 12 adjectives. No. First of all, half the people doing these readings and edits and high-level businessy things probably couldn't find all the adjectives or adjectival phrases or noun phrases or whatever if you gave them a book and a roadmap, because that stuff's just not taught so much anymore. Remember, I'm old. But it's also immaterial. What this question suggests every time this comes up, whether it's an editing client of mine or a coaching client of mine or somebody asking me a question on like a Sunday afternoon, what this question suggests, what's subcutaneous, what's lurking underneath the surface of this iceberg is, hey, John, I'm really scared I'm not telling my story effectively. I'm trying to figure out how to get the picture out of my head into somebody else's head, and I'm worried that the number and amount of words I'm using is the culprit. Because it's not. But I think it is, because I don't know what else I can control to make my fear feel better. Because when you're affecting the accounting of words, too little, too much, too little, too much, it screams anxiety to the reader. Oh my God, this person's given me all these details. It must be a big deal. Oh shit, I've got to keep this all straight in my head. That's what the reader's going through every time you drown them in detail and backstory. Whether we're talking about the lore of the rabbits from the earlier question, or whether we're trying to detail the powder blue Oldsmobile I drove in high school. If the extra details never come into the story to serve a functional story point, if it doesn't facilitate the plot, if it doesn't help my character arcs, if it doesn't feel like my reader is sitting next to the character going through their experience, who gives a shit? Who gives a shit? It's a nice detail. You spent brain chemistry on it. Good for you. I'm happy for you. But do you need the reader to care as much? Or do you, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, But the reader's going to like your work anyway, whether you tell them it's an Oldsmobile or a grandma car. You don't have to hunt for validation through your detail. This is especially true if you've self-published the book and somebody bought it. Because, well, you sold the book. Your part of the transaction is done. Ultimately, it's up to them, the reader, whether or not they think it's too little or too much detail. And if their review reflects too little or too much detail, well, that's variable. Because that's an opinion. You can't control an opinion. All you can do is tell your story the best way you can. If you're going to use detail at some points or others, it's got to be functional. Not necessarily practical, but why are you putting this detail, whatever it is, in the spot that you are? Why is this detail here? What is it trying to do? What do you want the reader to picture in this moment when they read this sentence? And I guarantee you, every client I have hearing this has had me tell that to them upwards of 30 times per manuscript. What is this detail doing here? What do you want the reader to picture? What are you trying to say here? That's the critical question. That's the critical point. Not this too little, too much shit. That's the entry-level part of this question. I want to take you to the next floor. I want you to go up a bit and think not about quantity of detail. I want you to think about, okay, I'm trying to get this picture across. Does this picture come across in some? That's where I want you to go. So where's the line? It is literally a draft by draft, author by author, scene by scene, paragraph by paragraph, sentence by sentence, phrase by phrase line. Don't overthink it. Great question. And boom. Twitch. Zoom. YouTube. Questions? Oh. Anything? It's okay if you don't. It's totally fine. If you're new, by the way, thanks for being here. If this is your second time back, thanks for coming back. I appreciate you. While you are looking to see if you have questions, let me scroll through and see if I have any hanging out over on Discord or... Okay, we'll deal with that later. All right. On we go. I guess on we go. Question 10. How do you handle plot holes? Well, I'm assuming by plot hole, you mean big giant thing in the story that just didn't get explained, as opposed to context in the story that you didn't feel like explaining. Plot holes are one of those like real interesting divisive internet fight elements, because people will look at something that is under justified in story or requires an additional suspension of disbelief. And since they're already looking for a reason to dislike the story, they'll just claim that a thing they like, a thing they don't like is a plot hole. Like, let's see. How come the girl from the desert planet who is suddenly good with like robots and ships and wiring and gears suddenly knows how to fly the big spaceship from my favorite movie series? That must be a plot hole. It couldn't just be based on inference that somebody who's familiar with the inner workings of a ship or who understands because they pilot their own smaller craft that it's just a bigger version of a small thing. It couldn't just be that, could it? Or maybe it's a plot hole when all of a sudden the version of the character who used to hang out with Matt Damon and you know, hunted some goodwills is now all of a sudden this weird, strangely like Frank Miller-ish version of the character I like. And you know, you know, the version we've melded together like 4 versions of this character, so we don't quite know why this weird version of the character I like is the way the character is. So it must be a plot hole. Yeah, I took the long way around there. Yeah, that got away from me. I could have done better with that one, but I think you take my point. You're in charge of plot holes. Like, that's your thing. You get to figure out if you've done a good enough job substantiating your story in a way that can be followed from point A to point B to point C to conclusion. So when you encounter a plot hole, like, hey, did I explain how we got to here from where we were? You've got 2 options. One, you write a scene, or you write a part of a scene, or you write a paragraph, or you write a sentence, or you write something to overtly explain how we're transitioning from one part to the other. Whether that's a conversation or an action or a paragraph about a character having feelings or a thought or a whatever. You overtly, meaning you put it on the page, you explain it to close that hole, to eliminate it because you've explained it, you can point to it in the text. Or, on the other hand, you don't. Because you don't have to handle everything. Because again, remember how we just talked about the amount of description? There is an argument to be made as to the level of detail that necessitates a plot hole. Because if it's just stuff I don't like, and therefore it's a plot hole because you didn't cater to me, the reader, who somehow feels I can bully you by withholding a certain number of stars on a website. I mean, shit, what does that mean? But I can somehow bully you and withhold my attention even though I've already paid for my book. Therefore, I get to call the shots and tell you how to write your stuff. You don't have to go with that. You can just write your book and put it out and move on with your day. The most important thing is the narrative side of this, the constructive side of this, the part you can control, which is go through your story. Look at your plot map. If you're a client, by the way, this is why I tell you to make a plot map. And if I have ever told you to make a plot map, you know what I'm talking about. And if you're a client and I've never told you to make a plot map, don't worry about it. You're fine. But you go back and you look at the blueprint you're using for your plot so that you figure out this goes to this, goes to this, goes to this, A to B to C to D to E to F to G, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you just make sure that every step along the way, every rung in that ladder, every step in that hierarchical staircase makes sense. That's the best way to handle a plot hole. Now, if you're going back to a work, let's say you wrote it, I don't know, X number of days, weeks, months, years ago, and you're coming back to it and you're like, I'm trying to revive this thing and do better with it. Then, I mean, good for you for coming back to work that you previously put off. Good job. But the first thing you want to do is look at the plot as a whole and see if you have to gut it entirely. Chances are, frankly, honestly, the vast majority of work you're trying to Frankenstein back to life on some stormy night, doctor, you're probably better off looking at the whole spine and figuring out whether you can redo half of it from a certain point forward or whether the whole thing's got to go. Trying to spot weld and spot fix old zombie work back into shape can often lead into problems you can't anticipate, like just strange story issues that you have to try to patch for your voice or patch for character development, and it can start spooling into other problems. But by and large, you can control how your plot deploys. You can control how things transition from one to the next to the next to the next. And it just comes down to organizing and understanding that your outros from scenes need to naturally lead into or towards the intros of your next scene, given chronological time and, you know, the passage of time and the movement of events and all that in the story. That's how you handle plot holes. Nice technical question. Hurrah. Oh, we're back on John's Opinion Corner. I feel like I need to get a sound for John's Opinion Corner. I really do. I don't know if I have like a good one. Hang on. Let's see. What do I have over here? Oh, I know. We can use this one.
It's a trap.
Let's use that one for John's Opinion Corner.
It's a trap.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's go with that. So, question 11, what bothers you the most about writing groups? Oof. Well, I ran writing groups for a while. I enjoyed running writing groups for a while until I didn't, until the group got unwieldy. Hundreds of people, all with demands, all with this strange wanting to compete for attention and time and interest. And, 100 people competing for 10 seats at around a physical table was a real issue. What bothers me most about writing groups now, though, is that so many of them don't work on the writing. Like, they share writing, and they go around every week or so, and they talk about their critique, and they say, hey, you wrote this thing real good, and I left you some notes about what I think your commas are doing. Like, they move in shallow waters, maybe knee-deep waters in some spots, in terms of how to move forward. But more often than not, they're not willing to push deeper. Because they don't want to fight, right? They don't want to, like, turn your writing group into a writing fight club. They don't want to, like, roll up their sleeves and really, like, challenge you. Hey, what are you doing with this story? You've been bringing the same weak-ass sauce for 6 months. What are you doing? They don't want to be uncomfortable in their space, so they don't push and challenge. They don't sit there and go, hey, when are you going to start putting theme in your work? When are you going to stop just telling me this story and start giving me a novel? The timidity and the passivity in writing groups really bothers me. Because if I were to go into a group now, the reason why, like, I get offered to go into groups all the time. Hey, John, come check out our digital critique group. You don't want me in your digital critique group. You don't. Because you'll get this. You'll get this person. You'll get me doing essentially my job. First of all, I don't want to do my job, but I can't turn it off, This is what I do, but you'll get this. You'll get me coming at you going like, hey, your dialogue doesn't work and your theme is real weak and I'm not quite sure about your second act and what's going on and why is it in the tense that it is? And I'm going to start firing questions at you, not because I think you're a bad writer, but because I want to see what you're trying to do, which means I got to sit here and look at the blueprint and figure out the building you're trying to build. Because I want to know your goal, because I want you to succeed. I push. And a lot of writing groups don't like to be pushed. They like to sit and give themselves the feeling of accomplishment. Well, we gave some notes. We met. We've been meeting regularly. It encourages me to write, which is good. And that should happen. That should be a thing that groups do. They should encourage you to keep going. But at the same time, it should encourage you to keep going and get better rather than just plateau. Which means somebody's got to push. Which means sometimes, what's the phrase? To make a pearl, you need to put a little abrasive in the clam. Is it a clam? Which shelled animal does that? I think it's clams or oysters. I don't know. I eat them. I probably shouldn't, but I do. But you need a little bit of grit. You need a little bit of abrasive to produce something. The competitive people are like, pressure makes diamonds and pressure bursts pipes, which is sort of the hyper extreme. It's a clam. The hyper extreme version of this, I'm trying to not steer you towards because we don't have to like try and crush it, bro. But at the same time, a passive writing group is detrimental because it gives you the illusion of progress without you really having to do any work. Because it's not enough to just oysters, clams, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Like the thing that makes fucking pearls. The thing, the shellfish. You probably have it with horseradish and some kind of vodka and orange juice. And you just kind of slurp them down at like 2 o'clock in the morning when you're trying to get that girl to give you her number. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you don't. I don't know. Maybe that was just me. But a passive writing group gives you the illusion of progress. Because there should be more to writing than just accumulating pages and writing scenes. It should be a march, a stride towards a goal of not just, I finished the book. Yay. My man. That's fair. But it it shouldn't just be, yeah, I finished the draft. That's important, but by no means should that just be the end result, especially when you've been talking outside the group about how much you want to be published. It should be, I finished the draft and I know how to revise and I know what my next thing is and I can't wait to get there because I'm going to do this because it's important to me. And I don't think enough of that stuff is talked about in a writing group because they don't want to ruffle feathers. They don't want to scare people off. But there's a difference between a hobbyist writing group and a group of writers trying to get published. A hobbyist group, man, we're just hanging out. We're just hanging out. We're JHO, as we used to say when we were kids. We're just hanging out. And that's fine. And there's no stakes. There's no pressure. You're just here hanging out. We're writing some stuff. We're having a laugh. Whatever. It's cool. We're having some fellowship and some camaraderie and some support, and we're just friends chilling. Cool. Great. But that's totally different than a group of people who are like, we are all authors trying to get published. Because that has to be a force. That has to be a thing. I can't think of the word. Something that propels you, a fuel. Let's go with this. It's a fuel that should drive you forward because it's a goal you're trying to reach. You're not going to get there just by kind of treading water. It's not enough to just write. It's not enough just to take the time and say you're part of a group. You got to keep making progress. And that means you're going to have to ask questions. And that means you're going to have to sit there and be uncomfortable. And sometimes that means you're going to have to give feedback to people to make them uncomfortable. And they need to be able to be mature enough to understand that even though you're giving them feedback about their work, you're not saying they're shitty humans. And a lot of writing groups aren't built like that. Everybody's got real sensitive sometimes, and that's fine. Sensitivity happens. It's a real thing. But if you don't establish clear boundaries, you don't establish effective communication skills, you don't rock some maturity every now and then, you're going to run into these issues where your writing group stagnates you. And as a result, your writing suffers. And as a result, your goal of publication seems farther away than ever, even though you're doing all this stuff, which is only going to increase your level of frustration. So what bothers me most about writing groups, they don't push. They don't challenge. They don't grow. They occupy. They take up space. There is a reason why I regularly invite critique groups to come here to chat or bring me in, pay me $40 and bring me in to talk to you for 2 hours and do a Q&A. Or depending on my mood, you can get me for a free Q&A if my fantasy football team is particularly losing badly and I'm just hanging out on a Sunday. You can I'm in spaces for free is what I'm saying sometimes. But you should take advantage of it. But what bugs me most is that there are these writers who could be making more progress, who could be doing better, who could be pushing themselves, and they've put people in situations around them where their status quo maintenance is more important than their growth. Keep things the way they are. Don't push. Don't challenge. Don't grow. Don't rock the boat. Because you'll lose these friends. You'll lose this stuff. You'll lose this access. You'll lose the comfort. You won't, but they're going to tell you that. They're going to tell you that you are because they don't want you to make them feel uncomfortable. Because if you're the one succeeding when they're not, they've got to sit and look at themselves. And very few people want to do that easily. So that's what bugs me most about writing groups.
It's a trap.
Yeah, I like that sound for that. Hooray. All right, on we go to the last question. Let's just check in real first. Other questions, you guys? Anybody? Anything? Her name, by the way, was Gina. The girl with the oysters and the vodka and the orange juice at the beach. Her name was Gina. I don't know why that popped in my head. Whatever. A long time ago. It was 20 years. All right. On we go. Zoom? Questions? YouTube? Are we working again? Twitch? We still good? Seems like we're good. All right. Here we go. our last thing of the day. Gentle advice. Question 12. How do I get more serious about writing? Where were you for my last question? How do I get more serious about writing? Do I write more? Do I just write better? What do I do? Here's how you get more serious. In a nutshell. Get a real clear picture of your goal in mind. What do you really want to do? Not the idealized, like, one day I want to wake up to an advance check with like 5 digits in it. How about we just go with, I want to get an advance. I want to be published. Figure out your goal. Strip it away from some of the nice bells and whistles and the trappings. I want to be interviewed by Oprah. Cool. How about we just go with, I want somebody to interview me about being an author. We dial it in so that we can break it down into a singular sort of starting point. And then you figure out, as honestly and clearly as possible, where you are in relation to that point. For example, if you're looking at this video, I want 50 subscribers. I have 23 or 24 by now. That thing doesn't update all that consistently. But I'm just about halfway. And I've given myself a time frame to do it in. One, because I had to give myself a time frame in order to put the graphic on the screen. And two, because if I just say, well, one day I'll get to it when I get to it, that won't incentivize me to make my best effort. For me, a timeline or a goal or a vector is really helpful. For you, it might not be. So use at your discretion. But you want to figure out what your goal is and figure out how far you are away from it so that you know what it is you have to do, how frequently you have to do it, and how hard it is each time to do it. So, for example, if you were here on Monday and you listened to the Monday stream about mental health and creativity, you'd know that I'm in a pretty low spot. As I said on Twitter the other day, if we can make a wrestling reference for Jeff, who I know will watch this later, I was a cowboy looking for his own dark order. I was desperate to figure out where I fit in, and I was desperate to figure out if it was time to close up shop and do nothing or shuffle off the mortal coil or whatever. And I was serious. And it is, I wake up every day and I fight the devil to figure out what I'm going to do. You know what I'm saying? And that affects how I frame and phrase my goals. Because now, instead of my goal being like, I want to be able to like have this real mega successful business where I'm regarded really highly with all these people and this big ass client list, now it literally comes down to, I want my business to do well enough so that I can buy bread and I can feed the pets and I can say I'm proud of what I do on a daily basis. Sometimes that feels like a lot. Sometimes it feels like nothing. Every day is different. But you figure out your goal and you figure out how many steps you are away from that goal, and you ballpark and figure out how hard it's going to be to take each step towards that goal. Some days it's going to be harder than others. But here's the trick. Here's where the seriousness gets in. Instead of making excuses, instead of finding those reasons to not do the thing, because we can all pretty quickly find reasons why things are in the way, or if things were different, it would be easier, or if this, or if that, or this, or that, or whatever other inflated thing we produce, we can find tons of reasons to keep us from doing. Oh man, it would be really great if I was doing this chat and I didn't have like huge crippling anxiety, so I could just put a camera on me, because I bet that would give me like 1 million subscribers. I don't know. Let's just assume it does. Or I bet I was somebody who, had better physical equipment so that I didn't have like a snake's nest of wires and I could plug things in and it would work right away. I bet that would make me way more professional. And I could go back to that sort of TV level work I did. Or, oh man, it'd be really cool if I just had more money in the bank account and I didn't have to worry about how I'm going to dodge this creditor tomorrow, or how I'm going to, steal Wi-Fi from my neighbor next week if the internet gets clamped off. Like, If things were different, things would be different. I can build up all those excuses. I can find all those reasons not to do things. And I can get lost in them. I can spend a lot of time doing that. I could spend hours a day finding distractions, finding reasons to not work, finding reasons to not take a step forward, and put a lot of time and energy in telling everybody, hey, here are the reasons why I'm not doing what I'm telling everybody is important to me. And I think we all know people. Maybe it's us. Maybe it's somebody we know. We all find people who put those reasons first ahead of their goal. And we often end up walking away going, I wonder how important that goal really is if every time they talk about it, there's like 15 problems. So how you get more serious, you find your goal and you figure out what you need to do to get there. And at times it's going to piss you off. At times it's going to bug you because you're going to make it sound on some level like it's really simple. Oh, all I got to do is just write this book and I got a book written. Oh, all I got to do is figure out how to make this plot. Oh, all I got to do is do this. Oh, all I got to do is get a query. And yeah, that level of frustration, I understand. But I'm not saying just because you can simplify it down that it becomes that simple. I'm just saying look at it honestly. Because then we're going to take that step, whatever it is, and we're going to break it down into all its pieces. Okay. In order to have a published book, I got to finish this. I got to finish a book. And I know I'm in the middle of my second draft. Okay. All right. Second draft. So I know breaking it down even smaller, I got to finish my second draft. Let's break it down even smaller. Can we get smaller? The smaller we make our pieces, the easier these pieces become. And all of a sudden, a difficult thing becomes more straightforward. All I got to do is write this second draft. Okay, no. All you got to do is write 10 chapters. Okay, all I got to do is write one chapter at a time. Okay, all I got to do in a chapter is write a page, a paragraph, a couple sentences. And you break it down 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 until the size of the piece of effort you have to expend feels manageable for you. And maybe you break it down into a couple small pieces so you can stack together 3 or 4 things. Because, yeah, if you break it down too much, I have to write words. Well, we've sort of watered ourselves down to a point. But if we turn it into, I got to finish my second draft and break it down to every day I got to put together a scene or half a scene or a couple pages or I got to put something on the page. But you leave that something kind of open-ended. Some days that something's going to be a paragraph and some days it's going to be a whole scene. And maybe some days it's going to be a whole chapter depending on when you get the fire under you. But you stack together these small potential accomplishments so that you're always aware of the progress you've made going towards your goal. And when it comes time and the excuses bubble up, and this isn't like you're desperately in need of taking an hour off or you're desperately in need of like doing something else when it isn't a pressure release thing, it's a legit choice. You choose to put the work in. Yeah, you could totally hop on YouTube and watch another 2 hours of like trailer breakdowns for that new movie that came out because you're 99% certain they've digitally removed an actor from that one fight scene. They totally have, you guys. Or you can't wait for that new episodic show to come on the streaming network you like, so you're going to watch that trailer a million times. Or you're really curious about this, or you find reasons to divert. Not because you're desperate for joy or happiness or relaxation, but you're just finding reasons to not work. There's a difference. When those things come up, you choose to put your work first. You keep doing that long enough, and you keep doing the work you do in manageable size pieces, whether your writing improves in quality, meaning you write better or not, or whether you write more frequently, quantity or not, you will become more serious about it because over time you will choose your work more than your excuses. And yeah, we are making a distinction here between the excuses we make and the breaks we need. Because there's a difference. The excuse is intentional. Like, I know I should be doing this other thing. I know I should be writing. I know I should be working on the website or working on this newsletter class I'm taking or figuring out what my next 4 business steps are or figuring out how I'm going to make my life better. I should be spending more time and space doing that stuff. But right now, with all the pressure and the stress and this and that, yeah, I am just sitting here listening to an audiobook. It doesn't get the work done, but I do feel better for the 45 minutes so that when that 45 minutes is up, when that chapter is over or whatever, I can try and get something else done. The one point I want to make here is don't confuse being serious with your work with I have to burn myself completely out in order to get my work done. Capitalism, comrades, teaches us to equate exhaustion and self-harm with success. That you're only good enough if you're willing to forego sleep, forego self-care, forego comfort, forego pleasure, because you need to hustle, bro, because you need to crush it, because you need to get this done, because if you don't get it done, 10 other people are going to get it done better than you. That isn't true. That's not how the world works. It's how they want the world to work. But the world's big enough for your story and their story and this person's story and that story over there. So if you don't take today and write because you desperately need a day where someone just every hour tells you that your butt looks amazing and like everybody should have a donut, cool, do what you got to do. You get more serious when you prioritize your effort in order to reach your goal. Not when you prioritize your effort to the detriment of yourself. Because what good is it going to be to have that book written when you are physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted and you don't have the energy to celebrate your first sale? Or when it just feels crushing because you realize that now you've traded one effort, the writing, for a different effort, marketing and promoting. You can be serious about your writing. You can be serious about being an author without burning yourself out. And here's the other element, without knocking yourself down. You don't have to self-deprecate your way to success. You are not a Catskills comedian. You don't have to knock yourself down so that other people don't see you as arrogant just because you have a goal. You can have a goal. And your pursuit of that goal, here's a fun fact, can be inspiring to others. And the efforts you go through can be inspiring to others. Not because you accomplish everything whiz-bang super perfect, but because you're making an effort. Because to someone else, you are an example of what they could do, which encourages and motivates and supports them. And all of a sudden, because you're pursuing your goal, indirectly, you are making the world a better place for somebody else. I tell myself that every day. And now I hope you tell yourself that every day. Because I don't know if I'll ever get a chance to talk to the people who directly inspire me, because the people who inspire me are in completely different spheres, just by the nature of who they are and what they do. And if I'm ever so lucky to run into these people or have a chance to see them, I will do my best to say something to that effect. But by and large, I don't expect to ever really cross paths with these people. I would love to, but the world and the universe are big places. Suffice to say that you take your inspiration where you can and you do your best with it that you can. And as long as you're not knocking yourself down and knocking other people down and pushing yourself to a harmful degree, so long as you are making consistent effort towards your goal and you are being kind to yourself in the place of failure and you are being challenging to yourself in the place of excuses, you'll get more serious about your work. It just takes time, which can be a hard thing for people to grapple with. They get impatient. They see other people succeeding and they feel like their time's running out even though everybody's on their own clock. It's okay. It takes as long as it takes. Yeah, it's going to take longer the more excuses you make and the less work you do. But even when you're doing the work because you know the roadmap, because you know what the next 50 things you have to do are, it's going to take as long as it takes. Some things will speed up. Some things will slow down. Can't control it. You just got to keep doing it. That's how you get more serious about your writing. Oof. Oof. Hang on, I'm chugging more water for that one. That was heavy, man. Ooh, I was not expecting it to go to the places it went to. But such is the nature of answering questions, right? One of the reasons why I love these things is because I don't always know where they're going to go even after I practice them like a billion times. Yeah. Heck of a night. Heck of a night. Let's, you know what? We're going to try something different. We're going to break it up a little bit. I want to do some businessy stuff before we do the outro. All right? Can you bear with me? So the next time I'm here, the next time I'm streaming, I should say, will be Monday the 22nd. So that's next Monday. I'll be streaming. Do I know the topic? It'll probably be something editorial and crunchy. I don't know. That might change. The two best places you can find out what my thinking is one, go check out the Discord. And two, go find me on Twitter, twitter.com/awesome_John. That's where I'll hash out what it is I'm doing. And if you have suggestions, by all means, write me a note and I'll get it. But the next time I'm here will be 7 p.m. Eastern on the 22nd of November. As for the next chat, yes, it will be the 24th of November at 7 p.m. Eastern. Yes, I know that is the day, the evening prior to American Thanksgiving, but because I don't go anywhere, I'll just be here doing that. So if that changes, and frankly, it might change, I might just say, you know what, I'm taking the night off. That announcement will be made first on the Discord, then on Twitter. Okay. I think that wraps up all the business stuff. Yeah. All right. Now, let me just close my calendar. Now we're going to the outro. Where's my damn outro graphic? Oh, that was really good. I apologize for all the technical issues. If you really want to know, I'm getting away from Streamlabs, and I'm going to jump to OBS and Stream Elements and all this other stuff. You might have seen some of those bells and whistles kind of operating in the background. I started to migrate over. We're going to straighten that out next week. Look forward to the experimentation this weekend, that's for sure. So until next week, I'll see you. I love you. Thank you so much for asking those questions. Thanks for letting me talk about writing groups and detail levels and description and being good to yourself. And thanks for being here. You, yet again, as always, save my life every week. And I am super thankful to know and have all of you. And by the way, yes, I really do love you. And you look amazing today. And I hope you've done something that feels good for yourself. Because, God damn it, you deserve it. I'll see you guys next week. Yeah? You're coming back? I hope so, because I can't wait to see you again. Tell your friends. This is how we do things here, because I'm trying to grow. And the best thing we can do, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, is help each other out. So all power to all people. Take care of yourselves. Tell the people you love that you love them. Be honest. Communicate strongly. Use your heart. And I will talk to you guys very, very soon.